The dangerous men never look dangerous at first. That's why women like me make mistakes. The first time I saw Damian Moretti, the entire restaurant forgot how to breathe. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died in the middle of sentences. Even the bartender nearly dropped a glass when the front doors opened and cold November air swept through the room. I remember looking up from the espresso machine and seeing him standing there in a black wool coat with rain still glistening on his shoulders. Tall, calm, controlled. The kind of man who didn't need attention because the room handed it to him automatically. Every eye followed him except mine. That was probably the reason he noticed me. I didn't know who he was back then. To me, he was just another rich guy walking into a Manhattan restaurant 10 minutes before closing. I grabbed the coffee pot and walked toward his table while everyone else suddenly found reasons to disappear. One waitress vanished into the kitchen. Another pretended to clean menus that were already clean. Nobody wanted to go near him. But I needed rent money more than I needed curiosity. Coffee? I asked. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. Damian looked up slowly. Gray eyes, sharp enough to cut through excuses. For a second, I had the strange feeling he was studying me instead of answering. You're the only person here acting normal, he finally said. His voice was low, smooth, dangerous in a quiet way. I forced a shrug and poured the coffee anyway. Maybe everyone else watches too many crime movies. One corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. Then he thanked me softly and looked back toward the window overlooking the rain-covered street. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The next night, he came back. Same table, same black coat, same silence following him like a shadow. And somehow, everyone in the restaurant became nervous all over again. I started noticing things after that. Men in expensive suits arriving before him, whispering into earpieces. Black SUVs parked across the street for hours at a time. Once, I watched our manager personally walk outside just to make sure Damian's car had a clear parking space near the entrance. Nobody treated normal customers that way. One night, curiosity got the better of me. Who is he? I whispered to another waitress while Damian sat alone near the windows. The color drained from her face immediately. Claire, she muttered, don't ask questions about men like that. Men like that. I didn't understand what she meant until 3 nights later. It was almost midnight when my shift ended. Rain hammered the sidewalks outside while taxis splashed dirty water onto the curb. I wrapped my scarf tighter and stepped into the freezing wind alone. That's when I noticed the man following me. Mid-30s, baseball cap, hands buried in his pockets. He stayed half a block behind me the entire time. Every turn I made, he made too. My heartbeat started climbing into my throat. I walked faster. So did he. The street suddenly felt too empty, too dark. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers just as headlights swept across the intersection beside me. A black SUV rolled silently to the curb. The rear window lowered halfway. And there he was, Damian Moretti, watching me, calm as ever. The man behind me stopped walking instantly. Damian didn't even look at him. Get in, Claire, he said quietly. Before this becomes a problem for everyone. Every survival instinct in my body told me not to get into that SUV. Manhattan was full of stories about women making stupid decisions after midnight. This felt like the beginning of one of them. Rain hammered against the sidewalks while cold wind whipped through my coat. But somehow Damian Moretti looked untouched by any of it. Calm, dry, like the storm itself avoided him. I am not getting into your car, I said, tightening my grip on my purse. Behind me, the man who had been following me suddenly crossed the street without another glance in my direction. He looked terrified. Damian noticed me watching him leave. Smart decision, he murmured. Most people recognize danger when they see it. I folded my arms. And what exactly am I supposed to recognize when I look at you? For the first time since I met him, Damian leaned back slightly in his seat and studied me with something dangerously close to amusement. That depends, he said softly. Are you usually this brave, Claire, or do you just have poor judgment? The fact that he knew my name sent a chill through me stronger than the November wind. I never told him my last name. I never told him where I lived either. Yet somehow he was here, waiting, watching, like he already knew my routine better than I did. How do you know my name? I asked quietly. Damian glanced toward the driver. A man in a dark suit immediately stepped out into the rain and opened the SUV door for me without a word. Get in, Damian repeated. You are cold. You are frightened. And standing out here arguing with me is attracting attention neither of us wants. I should have walked away. Instead, I slid into the leather seat across from him because deep down, some part of me already understood something terrifying. The streets outside felt less safe than the man everyone feared. The door shut behind me with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Warm air wrapped around me instantly. The inside of the SUV smelled faintly like cedar and expensive cologne. Damien sat across from me with one hand resting against the silver watch on his wrist, while city lights moved across his face through rain-covered windows. "You always scare women into your car?" I asked. "Only the stubborn ones." His answer came too quickly, like he already knew I would ask. Silence filled the space between us for a moment. Not awkward silence. Heavy silence. The kind that feels alive. I looked out the tinted windows and realized we were not moving. The driver was waiting for Damien's command. "You still have not answered my question," I said carefully. Why was that man following me? Damien's jaw tightened slightly. Small movement. Barely visible. But enough to tell me something underneath his calm had shifted. "Because someone made the mistake of noticing you." What does that even mean? He looked directly at me then. Gray eyes steady enough to make lying feel impossible. "It means," he said quietly, "that the closer you get to me, the more dangerous ordinary life becomes." My heartbeat stumbled. "I barely know you." "That is true." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "But everyone else already knows you matter to me." The rain outside suddenly felt louder. My throat went dry. "Why would I matter to someone like you?" Damien stared at me for a long second before answering. "Because you looked at me like I was human when everyone else in that restaurant looked at me like something to fear." I did not know what frightened me more. The honesty in his voice, or the fact that part of me believed him. I should have stayed away from Damien Moretti after that night in the SUV. Any intelligent woman would have. But the problem with dangerous men is that they leave questions behind them. And questions have a way of pulling you closer even when your instincts are screaming to run. The next morning, I woke up convinced the entire thing had been some strange late-night hallucination caused by exhaustion and too much caffeine. Then I stepped outside my apartment building and froze. The broken front gate that management had ignored for 3 months had been completely replaced overnight. Fresh steel. New security keypad. Even the cracked lobby light was fixed. Mr. Alvarez, the old superintendent who normally complained about everything, smiled nervously when he saw me. "Looks nice, huh?" he said. "Somebody paid for the whole thing in cash." My stomach tightened instantly. I did not ask who. I already knew. The worst part was how quickly Damien's presence started slipping into my life without permission. Little things. Quiet things. My favorite coffee order waiting for me at work before my shift even started. A black umbrella appearing beside me during a sudden rainstorm outside the bookstore next door. Once, I mentioned to a coworker that my heater barely worked in winter. 2 days later, a repair company showed up claiming someone had already covered the bill. Nobody ever said Damien's name out loud. But somehow he was everywhere. Watching. Anticipating. Like he was learning the shape of my life piece by piece. It should have terrified me more than it did. That was the part one hated admitting to myself. Because underneath the fear was something worse. Curiosity. 1 week after the SUV incident, Damien returned to the restaurant just before closing again. Same table, near the windows. Same dark suit. Same heavy silence surrounding him like invisible security. I tried ignoring him. I really did. But the entire room always seemed to bend around his presence. Even the lighting felt different when he walked in. Softer. Colder. More dangerous. I carried over his coffee without being asked this time. "You keep appearing in my life?" I said quietly while setting down the cup. Damien glanced up from his phone. "That sounds more like an accusation than an observation." "Maybe it is." He studied me for a moment before leaning back slightly in his chair. "Has anyone bothered you since that night?" I immediately thought about the man who followed me. The way he disappeared the second Damien arrived. "No," I admitted. Damien nodded once like he expected that answer. "Good." I crossed my arms. "You still have not explained what is happening." "Because explaining it would make things worse." "For who?" "You." His answer came too fast. Too honest. Before I could respond, the restaurant doors opened, and 2 men in expensive coats stepped inside. The atmosphere changed instantly. Not loud. Not obvious. Just tense. One of Damien's security men near the entrance straightened subtly. The two strangers looked directly toward Damien's table before scanning the room carefully. I felt it immediately. Something was wrong. Damien remained calm, but his attention sharpened. "Claire," he said softly without taking his eyes off the men, "go into the kitchen." My pulse quickened. What? Now? I should have argued. Instead, something in his tone made me move. Fast. I turned toward the kitchen hallway, just as one of the strangers suddenly smiled in my direction. It was not a friendly smile, more like recognition, and somehow that frightened me more than anything else. I barely made it through the kitchen doors before one of Damien's men appeared beside me. "Miss Bennett," he said quietly, "Mr. Moretti needs you to leave through the back exit." "Why?" The man hesitated for half a second. "Because people are starting to notice you." The back alley behind the restaurant smelled like rain, cigarette smoke, and cold concrete. I stood there with my heart pounding while one of Damien's security men scanned the empty street like he expected danger to appear out of thin air. "This is insane," I whispered. "I work in a restaurant. I am not part of whatever this is." The guard did not answer. He simply opened the rear door of another black SUV waiting beside the curb. I stared at it in disbelief. "You people seriously travel everywhere in these things." "Miss Bennett," he said carefully, "please get in the vehicle." Before I could argue again, the restaurant's back door opened behind me. Damien stepped outside, adjusting the cuff of his black coat, like nothing unusual had happened inside. Rain hit his shoulders instantly, but he barely seemed to notice. He looked toward me first. Not the street. Not his security team. Me. "Did anyone see her leave?" he asked calmly. "No, sir." Damien nodded once before his eyes returned to mine. "You are trembling. Because your entire life feels like the beginning of a true crime documentary." One of his guards looked horrified by my answer. Damien almost smiled again. "Almost. Get in the car, Claire." "No," the word escaped before I could stop it. The rain grew heavier around us. Somewhere down the block, a siren echoed through Manhattan traffic. Damien remained perfectly still. "You think I am overreacting?" he asked quietly. "I think you are controlling. And I think you are underestimating the situation." His voice never rose. That somehow made it worse. I folded my arms tightly against the cold. "You still have not explained why strangers suddenly know who I am." Damien looked toward the street for a brief second before lowering his voice. "Because people noticed I keep returning to the same restaurant." My stomach tightened. So men in my world pay attention to patterns. The words settled heavily between us. Men in my world. Not business associates. Not competitors. Something darker. Something organized. I hated how calm he sounded talking about it. Like danger was simply another item on his schedule. "I do not belong in your world," I whispered. Damien stepped closer then. Not enough to touch me. Just enough for me to catch the faint scent of cedar and rain clinging to his coat. That stopped being true the second someone followed you home. I looked away first. That bothered me more than it should have. Because some part of me knew he was right. My life had already changed. I just did not know how badly yet. Damien opened the SUV door himself this time. "One night," he said quietly. "Come somewhere safe while my people figure out who has been watching you. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you can decide if you still want to hate me." I should have walked away. Instead, exhaustion finally won. Fear too. I slid into the SUV again while Manhattan rain blurred the city lights outside the windows. Damien got in beside me this time instead of sitting across from me. The door closed softly behind us. The driver pulled away from the curb immediately. Silence filled the vehicle for several blocks before I realized we were heading downtown, toward the wealthiest part of the city. "Where are we going?" I asked quietly. Damien loosened his tie slightly before answering. "Home." The single word sent a strange chill through me. 20 minutes later, the SUV disappeared beneath a private underground entrance guarded by steel gates and armed security. I stared upward as the elevator carried us directly into the top floor of a glass skyscraper overlooking Manhattan. The doors opened slowly. Marble floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Soft piano music somewhere in the distance. It did not feel like an apartment. It felt like the private kingdom of a man too powerful to hear the word no very often. Damien watched my expression carefully as I stepped inside. "You are safe here," he said. I turned toward him immediately. That is exactly what scares me. I expected Damien Moretti's penthouse to feel cold. Instead, it felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful. Controlled. Like every sound inside those walls existed because he allowed it to. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, glowing beneath the rain, while soft jazz played somewhere far in the background. Expensive art covered the walls, but none of it looked chosen for decoration. It looked chosen for power. Everything about the place reminded me of Damien himself. Elegant, precise, impossible to fully relax around. A woman dressed in black appeared silently from another hallway carrying folded clothes and a tray with tea. "Miss Bennett," she said politely. "Mr. Moretti asked me to prepare the guest suite for you." Guest suite. The words sounded normal, but nothing about this situation felt normal anymore. "I am not staying long," I said quickly. She gave me a careful smile that somehow felt sympathetic. Nobody ever plans to. Before I could ask what that meant, she disappeared down the hallway again. I stood alone in the massive living room, hugging my arms tightly while lightning flickered beyond the windows. Somewhere behind me, Damien spoke quietly into his phone. I could not hear most of the conversation. Only fragments. "No mistakes. Find out who approached the restaurant. Nobody goes near her again. Her. Not Claire. Not the waitress. Just her." Like I had already become something understood inside his world. Damien ended the call and loosened the sleeves of his dress shirt before walking toward the kitchen area. Every movement looked calm. Practiced. The kind of composure built over years of hiding emotions behind expensive suits and controlled silence. "You can stop looking at the exits," he said without turning around. "Nobody is keeping you prisoner. That is hard to believe when there are armed guards outside your elevator." He poured himself a glass of water before finally looking at me again. "Those guards are there to keep people out, not to keep you in." I wanted to argue, but deep down I was beginning to realize something unsettling. Damien never actually threatened me. Not once. He simply rearranged the world around me until his protection became impossible to refuse. "Do women usually trust you this easily?" I asked quietly. Damien's expression barely changed. "No." "Then why do you sound so certain I will stay tonight?" He walked closer slowly, stopping just far enough away to avoid invading my space. "Because fear changes people, Claire." His voice lowered slightly. "And tonight you are more afraid of what is outside this building than what is inside it." The terrifying part was that he was right. A soft vibration interrupted the silence between us. Damien glanced down at his phone, and for the first time since meeting him, I saw a genuine emotion break through his composure. Not anger, not danger, concern. He answered immediately. "How is she?" he asked quietly. His entire demeanor shifted while listening to the person on the other end. Softer somehow. "Human. Tell her I will come tomorrow morning," he said before ending the call. I studied him carefully. Who was that? Damien hesitated. Tiny pause. Barely noticeable. "My mother." The answer caught me completely off guard. I do not know what I expected from a man like Damien Moretti, but it was not concern in his voice over a late-night phone call with his mother. He noticed my surprise instantly. "You expected something else?" "I do not know what I expected." Damien looked down briefly before speaking again. "Most people spend so much time fearing me that they forget I belonged to someone before I became this person." The honesty in his voice unsettled me more than his coldness ever had. Because monsters were easier to fear than men who still loved their mothers. He moved toward the hallway leading deeper into the penthouse before stopping beside me one last time. "Your room is the second door on the left," he said quietly. "And Claire." I looked up. His gray eyes held mine for a second too long. "Nobody will touch you while you are here." The strange thing was not that he said it. The strange thing was how badly I wanted to believe him. I barely slept that night. Not because the guest suite was uncomfortable. It was the opposite. The bed felt softer than anything I had ever touched. The city lights glowed beyond the massive windows like something out of a movie, and the silence inside Damien's penthouse felt strangely safe. That was the problem. I should not have felt safe there. I woke up just after sunrise to the faint smell of coffee drifting through the hallway. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then reality hit all at once. Damien Moretti. Armed guards. Black SUVs. Men watching me. My stomach tightened immediately. I pulled on the sweater left for me in the suite and stepped carefully into the hallway. The penthouse looked different in daylight. Less intimidating somehow. Still expensive. Still controlled. But warmer. Sunlight spilled across the marble floors while quiet piano music played from hidden speakers. I followed the smell of coffee toward the kitchen and froze when I saw Damien standing near the windows with his sleeves rolled up slightly, reading something on a tablet while drinking espresso. The image did not match the man I had built in my head. Mafia bosses were supposed to look cruel in the morning. Damien looked tired. "You walk quietly," he said without looking up. "You notice too much?" I replied automatically. One side of his mouth lifted faintly. "Occupational habit." I leaned against the kitchen counter carefully. "What occupation exactly?" Damien finally looked at me then. Gray eyes steady as always. "The kind you should stay far away from." Before I could respond, another man entered the penthouse from a private elevator. Older. Silver hair. Expensive navy suit. He stopped the second he noticed me standing there beside Damien. Surprise flickered across his face before disappearing instantly. "Sir," he said carefully to Damien, "the meeting downstairs starts in 20 minutes. Damien nodded once. "Reschedule it." The older man blinked in confusion. "Reschedule." "You heard me." The man's eyes shifted toward me again very briefly. Not judgmental. More curious. Like seeing me there answered questions nobody had dared ask aloud before. "Of course," he said quietly before disappearing back into the elevator. I looked at Damien immediately. "You canceled a meeting because of me?" He set his espresso cup down calmly. "I postponed it." "Why?" "Because I would rather stay here until I know you are calm enough to stop looking at every exit in the room." Heat rushed to my face because he was right. I had been tracking exits automatically since arriving. Damien noticed everything. "You act like this is normal," I muttered. "For me, it is." The honesty in his voice unsettled me again. Not because he sounded proud of his life. He did not. If anything, Damien always sounded exhausted by it. Like power had become a responsibility he could never put down. My eyes drifted toward the city outside the windows. "You could leave all this behind if you wanted." Silence filled the room for a second too long. When I looked back at him, something colder had returned to his expression. "No," he said quietly. "Men like me do not get to walk away clean." The words settled heavily between us. Before I could answer, Damien's phone buzzed sharply against the marble counter. He glanced at the screen, and for the first time since meeting him, I saw genuine anger flash across his face. Fast. Controlled. Dangerous. He answered immediately. "What happened?" The room fell silent except for the low sound of his voice. I watched his jaw tighten slowly while listening. "Who gave that order?" he asked coldly. My pulse started climbing instantly. Something was wrong. Damien ended the call and grabbed his coat without another word. "What happened?" I asked carefully. His eyes found mine immediately. "Someone tried to enter your apartment this morning." Every ounce of warmth disappeared from my body. "What?" Damien stepped closer, voice low and steady. "Claire," he said quietly, "you are not going home anymore. There is a specific kind of fear that changes you forever. Not panic, not screaming. Just the quiet realization that your old life is gone and nobody bothered asking your permission first." I stared at Damien across the kitchen while his words echoed inside my head. "You are not going home anymore." Simple sentence. Calm voice. But somehow it felt heavier than anything else he had said to me. "You do not get to decide that," I whispered. Damien slipped his coat on slowly, eyes never leaving mine. "Actually, Claire, right now I do." Anger finally pushed through my fear. "This is exactly what I mean. You keep controlling everything around me like I belong to you." Something unreadable flickered across his face before disappearing just as quickly. "If you belonged to me," he said quietly, "you would not still be arguing with me." I hated how calm he stayed during every conversation. Like emotions were weaknesses he stopped allowing himself years ago. "I want to see my apartment." "No, Damien." No, the firmness in his voice stopped me cold. Not loud. Not threatening. Absolute. He walked toward the private elevator while speaking into his phone again. "Double security on this floor," he ordered calmly. "Nobody enters without my approval." Then he looked back at me. "You are staying here until I know who is targeting you." "Targeting me because of you?" I shot back immediately. Silence followed. Damien stared at me for a long second before giving the smallest nod imaginable. "Yes," he admitted softly. The honesty knocked the anger out of me faster than denial would have. He could have lied. He could have blamed someone else. Instead, he stood there in a perfectly tailored black coat, admitting that my life had become dangerous because he noticed me. "Then let me leave," I whispered. "If I disappear, they stop caring." Damien's expression changed instantly. Not anger. Something darker. That is not how this works. How would I know how this works? I snapped. I am a waitress from Brooklyn, Damien. 2 weeks ago, my biggest problem was overdue rent and broken heating pipes. Now I wake up inside a fortress because strangers are watching me. He crossed the distance between us slowly until only a few feet remained. And you think I do not know exactly what that cost you? His voice dropped lower, rougher somehow. You think I wanted this near you? The question caught me off guard. Because for the first time since meeting Damien Moretti, he did not sound powerful. He sounded tired. Deeply tired. Like carrying the weight of his world had slowly hollowed him out from the inside. His phone buzzed again. Damien glanced at the screen before muttering something under his breath in Italian. I have to leave for a few hours, he said finally. There is food downstairs. Security stays with you at all times. I laughed once in disbelief. You say that like it is comforting. It is the only reason you are still safe. The elevator doors opened behind him with a soft chime. I should have stayed quiet. Instead, frustration finally exploded out of me. I am not one of your possessions, Damien. The words hit harder than I expected. He stopped moving completely. For several seconds, the only sound in the penthouse was the rain against the windows. Then Damien looked back at me slowly, gray eyes colder than I had ever seen them. Do not confuse protection with possession, he said quietly. If I wanted to control you, Claire, you would already know it. The elevator doors began closing behind him. But right before they shut completely, Damien spoke one last time. Lock your bedroom door tonight anyway. My heartbeat stumbled instantly. Why? The doors nearly closed before he answered. Because whoever entered your apartment this morning was searching for something. His eyes held mine one final second. And I do not think it was random anymore. The first thing I noticed after Damien left was the silence. Not normal silence. The kind that presses against your chest until you start hearing your own thoughts too loudly. Rain drifted against the glass walls of the penthouse while Manhattan moved below like another universe entirely. Somewhere down there, people were eating dinner, arguing over parking spots, living ordinary lives. Mine had disappeared in less than 2 weeks. I tried calling my manager at the restaurant around noon. No answer. I tried again an hour later. Straight to voicemail. By the third attempt, my anxiety had twisted into something sharper. One of Damien's security men stood near the elevator pretending not to listen while I paced the living room. Did something happen at the restaurant? I asked finally. The guard adjusted his suit jacket carefully. I do not know, Miss Bennett. That is not an answer. It is the only one I am allowed to give. Allowed. Everything around Damien revolved around permission and control. Even silence had rules in his world. I walked toward the massive windows overlooking the city and wrapped my arms tightly around myself. For the first time since arriving, the penthouse no longer felt safe. It felt isolated. Like the higher above Manhattan I climbed, the further away normal life became. My phone buzzed suddenly in my hand, nearly making me jump. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Heavy breathing filled the line for 2 long seconds. Then a man's voice spoke quietly. You should. Stop hiding behind Moretti before he gets bored of protecting you. My blood turned cold instantly. Who is this? A soft laugh answered me. Tell Damien some debts do not stay buried forever. The line went dead. My hand started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The guard noticed immediately and crossed the room. Miss Bennett. I stepped backward instinctively. Someone just called me. His expression hardened instantly. Give me the phone. Within seconds, 2 more security men appeared from somewhere deeper inside the penthouse. Calm voices. Fast movements. One man speaking Italian quietly into an earpiece, while another checked the call log on my phone. The entire atmosphere shifted. Tighter. More dangerous. What is happening? I asked quietly. Nobody answered. 10 minutes later, the private elevator doors opened and Damien stepped out looking colder than I had ever seen him. Dark coat. Rain still clinging to his shoulders. Gray eyes immediately finding mine. What did he say? No greeting. No hesitation. Straight to the point. I repeated the phone call as steadily as I could while Damien listened without interrupting. But the more I spoke, the quieter he became. That frightened me more than anger would have. Who was it? I whispered after finishing. Damien removed his gloves slowly, movements perfectly controlled. Someone who should not know your number. That does not answer my question. Because you are safer without the full answer. Frustration surged through me again. Stop deciding what I can handle. His eyes lifted sharply toward mine. Claire, Just my name. Low and warning. But I was too exhausted and terrified to stay quiet anymore. No, I snapped. You do not get to keep moving me around like a chess piece while pretending it is for my own good. The room went completely silent. Every guard suddenly looked uncomfortable. Damien stared at me for several long seconds before walking closer slowly. You think I enjoy this? He asked quietly. I think you are used to controlling everything. Because losing control gets people killed. The rawness underneath his voice caught me off guard. Not rage. Fear. Real fear. Damien ran one hand slowly across his jaw before speaking again, quieter this time. The men calling you are not interested in money, Claire. My heartbeat slowed painfully. Then what do they want? His gaze locked onto mine with terrifying intensity. They want leverage. The words settled into my chest like ice. Damien stepped even closer. Close enough for me to catch the exhaustion hidden beneath his expensive cologne and calm expression. And right now, he said softly, you are the only thing in my life they think I might actually care about. Everything changed after Damien admitted I mattered to him. Not because he suddenly became softer. He did not. Damien Moretti still carried silence like a weapon, still walked through rooms like he owned the air inside them. But after that night, I started noticing the cracks underneath the control. The exhaustion in his eyes when he thought nobody was watching. The way his jaw tightened every time another phone call came through. The fear he hid behind expensive suits and calm answers. Fear for me. 3 days passed inside the penthouse like a strange dream suspended above Manhattan. I stopped asking when I could leave because deep down I already knew the answer. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Damien's security stayed everywhere. Outside my door. Near the elevators. Watching every hallway like danger could rise from the marble floors themselves. But Damien changed too. He stopped treating me like a fragile secret and started speaking to me like someone standing beside him instead of behind him. Small things at first. Coffee waiting for me every morning exactly how I liked it. Jazz music playing softly before sunrise because he overheard me mention once that silence made me anxious. One night, I found him standing alone beside the windows long after midnight, staring down at the city with his tie loosened and exhaustion carved into his face. Do you ever sleep? I asked quietly from the hallway. Damien glanced back slowly. Not well. I walked closer before I could second-guess myself. Because of me? His eyes held mine for several seconds. Because men are planning around you now. The honesty still hit me every single time. I folded my arms tightly. Then let me go. Damien looked back toward the city lights again. You still think distance protects people in my world? Does it not? A bitter smile touched his face for half a second. No, Claire. His voice dropped lower. Distance only makes people easier to reach. The words settled heavily between us. Somewhere below, thunder rolled across Manhattan while rain streaked against the glass walls of the penthouse. Damien loosened his cuffs slowly before speaking again. When I was 19, my father taught me something the night he handed me this empire. He looked down briefly at the silver watch on his wrist. He said power is not measured by what a man controls. It is measured by what he cannot afford to lose. I felt my heartbeat slow painfully. Damien finally turned toward me fully then. No bodyguards. No cold mask. Just the man underneath everything dangerous. That is why this scares me, he admitted quietly. You became important before I had the chance to stop it. I should have walked away. Any sane woman would have. Instead,